You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
3CR is radical radio, and that means more than just alternative current affairs and political coverage.
We're radical because we're an independent media outlet, owned and operated by the community.
We're radical because we give communities the control of their own shows, with their own music, in their own languages.
We're radical because we provide a media platform for communities to build their own power to create social change.
Become a subscriber and support Radical Radio. Call us on 03 9419 8377 or subscribe online at 3cr.org.au/subscribe.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction, in the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed mind.
Welcome to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia on the National Community Radio Satellite. Listen to the Anarchist World This Week, Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. Listen to analysis of local, national, international events. Listen to analysis you'll never hear anywhere else.
Well, the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia, courtesy of the Community Radio Network. This program is streaming live on 3cr.org.au. It's coming to you from the studios of 3CR in Melbourne. My name is Joseph Toscano. I'm hosting the Anarchist World This Week. So welcome to all our listeners who are listening to this live or who are listening to the podcast across Australia. It's fascinating, isn't it? It's a fascinating week. But the thing about the Anarchist World This Week is we set the agenda. We're not going to kind of reply all the time to what's in the corporate-owned media, the government-gelded ABC, or all those disgusting virtual platforms. We set the agenda about what is important. And life can be quite interesting and sometimes fascinating. Usually I take about a week to decide on what topics I'm going to look at, and the topics range over a wide variety of issues. And I was toying with the idea, because, I've been a medical practitioner, a doctor for over 49 years, and I'm quite concerned about the fact that in the Western democracies, children are increasingly turning to suicide. It's a fact. It's not a belief, it's a fact. And you need to think, why is this happening in our world, especially the liberal Western democracies? This is in Gaza, which has been bombed to an inch of its extinction. This is a Western liberal parliamentary democracy with a social security system. And the children and young people, and when I talk about children, I'm talking about people under 30, not that they're children, but young people, is an increasing level of anxiety, increasing level of depression, even suicidal thoughts. Now, if you're concerned about this issue that I'm going to speak about, and you've got your own issues, I do recommend that you either contact Lifeline or the Black Dog Institute. Because obviously, when you broadcast, you don't know who you're broadcasting to and the impact you have on people. There are organisations out there that can be of assistance. At the same time as I was thinking about this, yesterday I received an email from a listener in Canberra, William. And I've never met William. I don't know William. I've never spoken to William. but I received an email which somehow fitted extraordinarily interwoven into this particular topic. And I'll read out the email. Thoughts to share. Dear Joe, I'm a listener of the Anarchist World. I'm 23 and at the moment I live in Canberra. I am very appreciative of the show. Having at least some easily accessible Australian anarchist media is a great relief to me. It keeps me feeling sane despite the strange world we find ourselves in. I was watching ABC's news the other night and wrote down the words that came to me at various horrors unfolded within the world. I wondered if you might read these words out during a broadcast or on a podcast, which is how I mostly listen. If it's not very good and you prefer not to, then that's all well and good too. Rationale. I watch the news occasionally, usually when I'm alone in the house. No one else is invited to my premiere of despair. Here, I hear that a 19-year-old journalist, a boy, was blown up by the Israeli Defence Forces. Missile fired directly into his bedroom via a drone. A moment or two fade. I see an old man cry as he expels something to the effect of 50 millibars in hours. It's just devastating. The man is a climate scientist. Doom resides within his diction. Seconds slip away. I think about plans. My plans. As if anyone could possibly plan for the long term, when it seems we may not have long left at all. I want to remain hopeful, but I'm not sure that's rational in the long term. Thank you for taking the time to reading this email and broadcasting each week. Regards, William. Now, look, I was exceptionally surprised to receive the email because it was coinciding with what I was thinking. And obviously it coincides with what many older people are thinking, is where have we gone wrong? What's happened to put younger people in liberal Western democracies into such a situation where despair seems to be the only option? But the fact is that the Anarchist World this week is about hope. It's not about despair. It's about hope. And hope is, as I keep saying, the love child of desire and expectations. The desire for change and the expectation that change will occur. Despair is is what drives those who exercise power and control wealth. The more we believe, and the key word is believe, that we are incapable of introducing change to derail this one-way express train to oblivion, the more powerful they become. So why do Western liberal parliamentary democracies find themselves in such a critical situation? And the answer is relatively simple, although a lot of people don't actually talk about it. Now, I'm just going to go back to basics and hopefully just stay with me for a little while. As far as anxiety and depression is concerned, there are two major types. There's actually three. There's reactive depression, where you react to the situation you find yourself in and you slip into a position of hopelessness, and that increases anxiety. There's an endogenous depression, which is an impression which has a genetic footprint. And then there's an interlinking of both. So why are an increasing number of children now, we're talking about children under 10, and teenagers and young people find themselves in this situation? We, you, me, the older generation, we have been sucked in, I know it's a terrible word, by the idea that life is about creating ever-increasing profits. And what we've seen over the last 40 to 50 years is the domination of Western parliamentary democratic thinking by a philosophy which is based on the creation of profits from private investment. And what we've seen over the last 40 to 50 years, and I'll go through this once again, because you see, when you're involved in, change, sometimes you've got to repeat things. What we've seen is the implementation of policies at a political, social and cultural level, which has basically closed the door down for an increasing number of younger people. Now let's look at the situation in Australia, which I'm familiar with, okay? You're young. When you're very young, you're told you can do whatever you like, you can be whatever you want to be, and if you try hard and work hard, the world's your oyster. As you get older, you begin to realise that this isn't exactly correct. Some people find this when they're very young because of the situation they find themselves in. Others come to this realisation as they try to make sense of the world around them. So what have we done as a society? And that's the key. What have we done as a society to actually close down the social elevator? And what do I mean by the social elevator? What have we done to ensure the divisions which exist in society, whether they're class divisions or divisions based on other aspects, are kept in place? And we've done this for a variety of ways. And the first most important way is the privatisation of higher education. It's all very well if your guardians or parents have disposable income and can pay for your education, but if we as a society are not willing to give young people access to education free of charge and saddle them or burden them with a debt which can take decades to pay off, then we find ourselves in a situation where people are increasingly under economic pressures to pay those bills. So what do? You go and work part-time. And if you're working part-time, you find that most of the employers you're involved in are having a difficulty in surviving because they're under extreme pressure, not just currently, but always under extreme pressure, and they exploit their staff. At the same time, it is becoming increasingly difficult to form interpersonal relationships which mean something. Now, it's all very well to blame social media, to blame the virtual platforms. Obviously, social media and the virtual platforms have some impact, but that's not the issue. The issue is that as individuals, we are coming under increasing pressures from an economic system which denies a significant number of people the ability to develop themselves to their fullest potential. At the same time, we are now seeing the end game as far as the private investment for private profit mantra is concerned. And that's when we talk about the climate emergency, which many people in this country, and especially in the US of A, still don't believe is real, despite. So when young people are faced with the dilemma that they have an increasing economic pressures placed on them, they're faced with a future which looks bleak because we as a community are more willing to throw our support behind an economic system which rewards those who have the most. We then place increasing psychological and physical pressure on young people. So what happens is people put away the ability, or they put aside the ability to form permanent relationships, stable relationships, because most of their life they're basically working to pay bills. It's an extraordinary situation. The dilemma is it's not just the very young who now face this issue, it's also the very old. So the whole purpose of superannuation was to privatise old age. It was a little bit like privatising education for young people. You privatise old age for old people. But the dilemma with superannuation is the more you earn, the more you put aside, the more comfortable retirement. It should be the other way around. Because the less you earn, the less you put away, you can't buy a home, and you find yourself facing the same pressures that young people face. So instead of young fighting old, I think it's now time that people realise that in many regards they're in the same boat because we have swallowed the mantra that the only way forward is through a private investment for private profit model. Now, obviously, this is not the only reason, but this is a significant reason. Now, one way to actually tackle this and provide economic security in a parliamentary democracy, remember, this isn't some tin pot little country with no resources. This is a country which is rich in resources, but those resources are manipulated, owned, extracted, processed by a shrinking minority. That's why we have billionaires in this country, and that's why we have people not able to put a roof over their heads or spending most of their disposable income putting a roof over their head. So, what's a solution? I'm not talking about revolution, blood in the streets. A simple solution is a universal basic income. We are rich enough in this country to have a universal basic income. We saw this during the COVID-19 pandemic. Although there are many negatives, the fact that people on social security benefits had their wages doubled, and the fact that other people were able to continue receiving a wage as the government attempted to tackle the issue, highlighted that a country as rich as Australia could have a universal basic income. And what a universal basic income does, it allows people to survive in a dignified manner. And if we need to nationalise this country's resources in order to provide a universal basic income and a decent standard of living for this country's First Nations people, that is something that we should do. Why continue to allow a small section of society that owns the means of production, distribution, exchange, communication to dominate our very existence and create the situation we find ourselves in, where younger people in this country find that they are having difficulty looking towards the future because of the despair around them. The fact is, every movement starts small. Movements grow as a response to situations that don't change. And the dilemma is that as far as a parliamentary democracy is concerned, what we've seen is the very essence of the concept of democracy has been subverted. The essence of a parliamentary democracy is to provide the greatest good to the greatest number. It's not to provide the least good to the smallest number. And that's what we have today. And that's what the deregulation, privatisation, globalisation and corporatisation revolution has delivered to us in this country and around the world. And that, to a significant degree, is what has heightened the anxiety and depression the increasing levels of anxiety and depression that we see amongst younger people in our society, and we are beginning to see amongst older people in our society who should be enjoying the fruits of their labour. So, as I said before, to a significant degree, what's anarchy? Anarchos means without rulers. It's about creating a society without rulers, not without rules. What gives rulers the ability to determine the lives of billions of people? Inequalities of power and wealth. So the anarchist struggle is the struggle to devolve power, seize back the political organisations and instruments which are supposed to deliver the greatest good to the greatest number, and hold wealth in common, as with a universal basic income, to ensure everybody benefits from the commonwealth. Listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. My name is Joseph Toscano. I'm hosting today's program. Let's move on, and hopefully we don't depress you as you move on, because, as I said before, I've been doing this program for over, 45 years in various guises, right? Up till 1989, it was called Encounters with the Third Alternative, because we had anarchism, communism, capitalism. Communism has fallen over itself, and we've got capitalism and anarchism, all right? And then we changed the Anarchist World this week. So, broadcasting is about hope. It's not about creating a doomsday future where there is no future. It's not about creating a dystopia where there is no ability to actually crawl out of that dystopia or jump off a train which is running over a cliff. It's about creating that hope, that desire and expectation for change, which will stop that train before it goes over that cliff. And that's what anarchism is about. It's not about violence, killing people, using bombs, as we see states do every day. It's about creating that hope which encourages people to take action, to control not only their own lives, but to control their communities, control the political processes, change the culture. It may seem an inordinately difficult task, but anything that's worthwhile is difficult. And it's as much about the journey as the end point. And apathy, hopelessness, despair is the aphrodisiac of the ruling classes. As long as we believe or feel that change is impossible, that you can't fight City Hall, that nothing will ever change, we will be faced with the same dilemma where those who promote a private investment for private profit mantra will continue to grow rich and powerful at the expense of the majority of the population. You see, climate emergency is an interesting concept, not because we face oblivion, obviously we could, because, when you look at planet Earth, it's not a very stable situation, is it, the blue planet? You've got 8 billion people on a globe, and it's, 20 kilometres of air or something, stratosphere, and that's it. When you think about it, and you've got finite resources. Doesn't matter how clever we are as scientists, we do have finite resources. So in many ways, the climate emergency is us denying a future to the unborn. And in many regards, we're doing this today as birth numbers plummet in Western parliamentary democracies, as more and more people feel economic pressures in terms of having children, or decide there's no point having children because there's no future for their children. So it's like us crawling over the bodies of the unborn. That's what a climate emergency is. Let's move on. Gaza's murder zones. Now, I know you may be tired of me talking about the Gaza carnage. I never use the word war. The Gaza carnage and what's happening in southern Lebanon. And we've been doing it now every week since the October 7. But it's fascinating. See, a lot of people have the belief, and it's a belief, that Hamas, because it's listed as a terrorist organisation, and Hezbollah, because it's listed as a terrorist organisation in Australia, although Hezbollah is not listed as a terrorist organisation in most European countries, that somehow these organisations have no popular support. And the Israeli strategy was very simple. Let's kill the leaders. Let's kill the men and women that are bearing arms, and it'll be the end of the conflict. The dilemma is that Gaza, an enclave of 2.3 million people, was governed by Hamas. During the 17-year period, has been blockaded by the Israeli state. So the Israeli strategy is very simple. It was very simple. Let's level Gaza. We've got the weapons to do it. We've got the military capability. Let's kill the leadership. Let's destroy the militants. And somehow the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine will welcome us as so-called liberators. Now, this strategy hasn't worked. If you see this, if you see the pictures of Gaza today, you can see that although the place has been levelled, and that although over 43,000 people and possibly another 10 or 15,000 that are buried under the rubble have been killed, the strategy hasn't worked. So the Israeli government is now embarking on a strategy which is eerily similar to what happened in many places during World War II, which happened in Biafra during the Nigerian Civil War in the 60s. So what it's creating is what I describe as murder zones. You're concerned a particular section of the population may be resisting actively, although you've been pounding them for over a year. So what you do is you isolate particular sections of the population. Currently it's northern Gaza. You break it up into quarters. You prevent food, water, medical aid going to those sites. And anything that moves becomes a legitimate target. Now, you may think this is some type of video game. or you may think that I'm making this up, or you may think that I'm totally deluded. But the fact is that what we are seeing is the implementation of policies which are directly and indirectly being supported by the United States of America, which makes what's happening in Ukraine look like a picnic. And to think this can occur in the 21st century really highlights what happens when nation states become feral and are armed and are able to use any device they have, apart from nuclear bombs currently, to put down what they think is an uprising. And the fact is, what the Israeli government, courtesy of the Israeli Defence Forces, have done in Gaza and in southern Lebanon is they haven't bought security for Israel. They haven't bought security for one Israeli citizens. What they've done is they've created generations of militants who will be baying for revenge in the future. Because it's exceptionally difficult to put down a movement which has widespread community support, as we saw in Vietnam, as we see in many parts of the world, as we saw in the 300-year struggle by the Irish to achieve independence. Irrespective of what you do to a leadership, the fact is that what is happening in Gaza, in the West Bank, in southern Lebanon, all that is creating is decades of insecurity for the Israeli state. And the sooner the Israeli people understand that the trajectory they have gone on is a trajectory which will mar their future, the sooner these murdered zones will disappear. You're listening to The Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia. Something a bit lighter, eh? Cooking less, living more. You see, if you live in a capitalist economy, you need an idea to make a buck, all right? There's new technology and you can do a virtual platform and you can become a Musk and, own a virtual platform or two or three. But there is a more insidious revolution going on in this country, which most people, I think, don't really think much about. And the slogan which I've read out, cooking less, living more, that's not my slogan. That's the slogan of one of these corporations. See, what we've seen in the last 40 to 50 years is the privatisation of food preparation. Historically, food was prepared, in households. People went out, they grew their own food, they bought food, whatever, brought it home, prepared it, ate it. That gave them a little bit of control over what they were able to enjoy, obviously depending on their economic situation. But it gave them a little bit of control. Not only did it that, it also helped to cement the family unit, because when you cook, eat together, you get a more cohesive type of society. But what we've seen with the introduction of fast food outlets initially was the privatisation of food preparation, not in terms of giving people a break once a week or twice a week where they bought takeaway. But what we're seeing now is the full privatisation of food preparation through organisations and businesses that provide food for a cost which is pre-prepared. I'm not talking about the old frozen television dinners, although they're still around. But I'm talking about the fact that people are saying, if you cook less, you live more. If you cook less, you live more. The fact is, the privatisation of food preparation has done two things. It has helped to decrease life expectancy in this country. That's right. Decrease life expectancy. Because the whole purpose of privatising food preparation is to actually make a profit for a third party. So what we've done, if we've changed a couple situation into a ménage à trois, where somebody else has jumped to the bed, saying, you know, and this person that's jumped into the bed is there to make a buck. And there is a big buck to be made from the privatisation of food preparation, especially, that's right, especially when the government subsidises, to a significant degree, many of these businesses that are creating massive issues in terms of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiac issues in a growing number of Australians. So it's something to think about. I know it's difficult to eat fresh, but you don't have to eat meat. You don't have to eat fish. You can, if you keep away from the supermarkets, you can buy fresh fruit and vegetables. And if you need to go to the supermarket, you can always buy the frozen product. Frozen beans, frozen broad beans, whatever. Not things that are pre-prepared with lots of salt and lots of sugar. All you've got to do next time you go into a supermarket and you pick up a tin and you pick up a bottle and you've got a few hours to spare, you can actually look at the content of salt and sugar. And to a significant degree, the obesity and all the related issues which we have in society today, and I include myself in that, you know, as somebody who's been trying to lose weight now for some time for medical issues, the fact is you can eat fresh and you can prepare food in a relatively quick manner. Now, another solution which I've been thinking about, it's not new. Anything that I think about is not new. Obviously, somebody else has thought of it before, because if you have one original thought in your lifetime, you're ahead, is why don't we have government, state and federal government subsidised restaurants which provide nutritious food for large numbers of people who find it difficult to cook, or who don't want to cook for themselves anymore because of their age or whatever. It can be easily done. But again, we leave it to the private sector. We leave it to the private sector. So, think about it. Let's move on. You are what you eat? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Oh, poor old Senator Thorpe. She didn't get a Guernsey to the Paramatta barbecue. Look, people talk about disrespect. Now, come on. Let's look at the type of parliamentary system we have in this country. Now, Senator Lydia Thorpe found herself in the situation when she was initially elected as a Green senator that in order to take her seat in Parliament, she had to swear allegiance to the monarch and the fruits of their loins. Every federal parliamentarian in this country, which is supposed to be independent, needs to swear allegiance to the monarch and their descendants. Full stop. if you don't swear allegiance, you cannot take up your parliamentary seat, although you find yourself in that situation because you have followed the rules of the electoral game and gained that seat. So the will of the people is irrelevant. You can get 99% of people voting for you, and you turn up at Parliament, and if you refuse to swear allegiance to the monarch and their descendants, you cannot take up your parliamentary seat. It's pathetic. Totally pathetic. That's the issue. I mean, I can understand Senator Thorpe's situation. I can understand because you get to the situation where every road is blocked. Although there is the illusion that change is possible, every road is blocked. But it's more than that. It's the fact that in this country, in 2024, if you're lucky enough to be elected to Parliament, to represent the people of this country, if you don't swear allegiance to some grubby, disgusting mass murderer, then somehow you're not fit to stand for Parliament. Who shows disrespect to who? The system itself shows a total disrespect for the electors of this country. You're listening to The Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. What do the Catholic Church and Qantas have in common? Seems a bit strange, doesn't it? Strange combination, the Catholic Church and Qantas. Well, each group fought every inch of the way to prevent them acknowledging what they had done was not very nice, and more importantly, to prevent them paying compensation. Now, Qantas, after a 4-year struggle, which went to the High Court and back, is now saying, we're so sorry. Sorry to all those people we illegally, got rid of. But they fought every inch of the way, using fancy lawyers, spending millions of dollars, paying fancy lawyers to ensure that those workers who were illegally fired got any compensation. A little bit like the pedophile priests in the Catholic Church. Fought every inch of the way, using every legal option available to them because of the resources they had in order to, guess what? Not pay compensation. Extraordinary. I mean, again, you can link it. What does Qantas, the Catholic Church, and Robodebt have in common, eh? Now, I realise that Robodebt seems to be getting a little bit of a coverage again. And the question is, can Robodebt happen again? Have the changes that have made to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal prevent the possibility of illegal actions by the government happening again? Because you see, Qantas, nobody's going to lose any sleep over it, are they? The shareholders will pay, not the people responsible for that. So that illegal sacking, they've gone overseas and are enjoying themselves. Good luck to them. All right. Catholic Church continues to meander on. Robodebt, guess what? And you may find this very hard to believe. The way the public servant is structured, what actually happened is that on over 200 occasions. Over 200 occasions, right? Government officials in the public service said that Robodebt was illegal. This is while it was being implemented. Senior echelons of the public service refused to make any of those reports public, so they could continue to administer a system which was created to create fear, anxiety, depression among some of the most vulnerable people in our society, claiming through some algorithm that they had some debt to the Commonwealth government. 4 years on, minuscule compensation. There are still people waiting to be compensated. There are still people waiting to have money refunded to them. And more importantly, although there have been major changes to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal and a whole new group of appointments have been made, which are not political appointments, as were in the previous Australian Administrative Tribunal, we now find that the possibility of the same thing happening again is a real issue that we face. And that's the issue, secrecy. How could any organisation which had 200 reports which said that that particular piece of legislation was illegal not come to the public's attention? Remember the good old days, a few years ago during the Morrison government? Robodebt was introduced. We were told they would save hundreds of millions of dollars from all these leaners who were feeding off the social security system. What a load of garbage. So, anybody in court? No. Few public servants have lost their jobs, but good payouts. Anybody going to appear in court? No. Seal section of the Royal Commission been unsealed? Naming names? No. Does anybody remember? Well, we don't remember because we're watching Peter Dutton do a Bradbury. As the more progressive forces in the society fight amongst each other to score another electoral gain here and there, Mr. Dutton and his crew, right down the middle, like Mr. Bradbury, they fall over. Bingo, you wake up, the Liberal National Party, the next federal government in this country. And if you think it's not possible, think again. Short memories. And see, this is the problem with Australia. This is the problem, isn't it? History began when I woke up this morning. That's when it began. And the more I find out about Australian history, the more I realise how important it is to understand, to know the past. Without knowing the past, you don't understand what's happening, and there is no possibility of changing the future. So let's not be seduced by Google. Now, I know you're an intelligent person and you got your little screen to the world in front of you and you can type in anything you like and, hey, presto, all this information comes up. Forget about the ads, all right? Remember, you are the product, boys and girls. Now, in Australia, anybody who is looking up information on the World Wide Web, guess where 98% of you will end up? Not 90%, not 70%, not 60%. On Google. That's right. And who owns Google? Who owns that virtual platform? Is it a community platform? No. So Google is Mr. and Mrs. 98%. And they talk about corporatisation. This is what corporatisation is all about. It's about having one company whose major mission statement is to make increasing profits for their major shareholders, right? Dominate an important area of human activity. Is there any call or any legislation in this country that can break up corporations? Well, there isn't. There is no legislation. So when you walk into a, what would I call it, a temple of consumption, you know, you got synagogues, you got churches, you got temples, you got mosques, and you've also got temples of consumption. They're our major religious institution in this country because, you know, we're based on a private investment, private profit mantra. When you walk in, you would think, well, you know, I'd like to go to this little shop and that little shop. It's the same people, same corporations. Some of them may own 20, 30 different brands. So when you walk into one brand, you're basically supporting the same company. We've seen the corporatisation of food preparation, the corporatisation of retail, the corporatisation of energy, the corporatisation of the virtual world, the corporatisation of transport, and the list goes on and on. And this has occurred because we've believed the mantra that you need to give the private sector its head. Government should walk away, move away from the private sector, deregulate, privatise. And what happens when you do that? You form large corporations which then dominate the economic sphere, dominate the type of legislative agenda that goes through Parliament. No wonder we find ourselves in this situation in 2024. And last but not least, do you know that the other world is meeting? Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, South Africa, to name a few, are meeting. Huge meeting at Gaza, I think in a Russian city. Huge meeting of about 70% of the world's population. And what's their major agenda? To break the monopoly or the hegemony of the United States of America and its shrinking band of allies, including Australia, has on this planet's economic system. So it'll be interesting, isn't it? You've got dictatorships, you've got parliamentary democracies all coming together to break this monetary behemoth which dominates the lives of so many people on this planet, like 98%. And guess what? We've just bought another $7 billion of military hardware from the US of A. Yeah, some nice missiles. As I keep saying, you want to live comfortably in our part of the world, you can't hook up Australia to a few tugboats and tow it to the east or west coast, or the west coast of the USA. We need to be able to get on with our neighbours, and this is becoming increasingly difficult, especially when you look at who now is in charge of Indonesia and the increasing authoritarian nature of the Indonesian government and the re-emergence of the Indonesian military as the main force in Indonesian politics. You've been listening to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. My name is Joseph Toscano. Don't forget to listen in next week. Next week I'll be talking about housing. It's fascinating, isn't it? All these things to help the private sector to build some more homes, but at the same time, nothing for public housing. And the important thing is, as I say to all of you, dig in, don't give up. If you give up, you've lost the ability to determine the future. That is the aphrodisiac of those who make decisions today. Your despair, your despondency, your depression, your inability to actually see beyond those lies. Thank you again for listening to The Anarchist World this week on your local community radio network. That's right. Well, I shouldn't. That's a mistake, isn't it? On your local community radio station. Thank you once again for listening to The Anarchist World this week. Listen in next week. You can leave messages on 0439 395 489. Email me at info@pipsy.net. Listen to The Anarchist World this week, next week on your local community radio station, courtesy of the Community Radio Network.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction.
An analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Anarchist World this week. Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Listen to The Anarchist World this week for an up-to-date analysis of local, national and international events.
Poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
.3CR is about community, and we welcome your participation at the station.
3CR is open to a wide diversity of volunteers and is a great way to connect with Melbourne's activist community.
Have you ever thought about volunteering, doing a reception shift, getting a program on air?
Training in radio skills or contributing to one of the station's committees.
There are many ways to be involved at 3CR.
To find out more, go to 3cr.org.au and get in touch.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.